All right, I think you can hopefully hear me, so I will stand out here. That's not right, is it? I hope not. That's my time telling me I've got 12 minutes. I'm going to take longer than that. Thanks all for coming. I hope you're having a good conference. It's been a big effort this year, so I hope it's going well. I'd like to acknowledge the Mayor of Dunedin, Dave Cull, and thank you for your points there. You've helped fill out part of my presentation, and also to David Hermans, who helped fill out another one, because I'm going to start to talk about a trip we recently did to the US. And once I work out how to use this machine, it's the big obvious button. Because they sort of gave us a bit of detail around why on earth we went to the US. Look, it was about growth management. We got problems growing in New Zealand, in case you didn't know. And the US is an interesting case study because it's got a bit of variation. So when I say we went to the US, we didn't go everywhere. It's a big place. We started off there in Portland, Oregon, up in the northwest. Went down to Denver, Colorado, sort of in the middle. Then down to Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth. So we are looking at metro areas. I should be very clear on that. We're not talking about a city as in some sort of boundary between two local government entities. We're talking about an area of urban expanse, and then Houston, Texas, and we sort of looked at all those items there. You see on the right: housing, transport, funding, financing, infrastructure, that sort of stuff. So why on earth do we go to those 4 cities? Well, it has something to do with that graph. There's a few reasons. We're particularly interested in transport as well, but that one tells a bit of a story there. That's housing. So you all have seen something like that before. You'll notice you've got a couple of weird things going on there. You've got sort of 3 groups of cities, if you like. You got right at the top, you got Auckland, which is a shambles, and David pointed out a number of the issues that we're grappling with here. In terms of inequality driven by housing, and the issues that we're having, just building homes for people to live in. But then down below that, you've got 2 of the cities we visited. So their house price ratios you see there are a bit more variable, and they're higher than the other 2 cities. So there's something in the States, there's something there which is different. Why is Auckland right up there is one thing we want to know. But why are those other 2 cities sort of highish? And when we went to speak to them, they thought housing was a really big crisis for them. We laughed. It was funny because it's half as bad as what we have here. But then we looked at those two cities at the bottom. Why are they down there? Why are their prices in relation to income quite steady? We'd like to know that. A lot of people blame geography. Well, there's 2 of the cities. One of them's got much higher house prices and have been varying and than the other one. It's pretty hard to tell the difference in some respects, isn't it? One of the top city there has actually got a bit of it's come up against some water barriers on its eastern side. The bottom picture's coming up against barriers on its western side, but otherwise they're big flat areas. Why has one of them got higher house prices and can't seem to build quite fast enough than the other one? You know, it's not population. I mean, if anything, you'd expect bigger cities to have, bigger challenges providing affordable houses for their population. But actually, you see there, the more affordable cities are the bigger ones. What's going on? They're all growing. In fact, the city with the biggest housing challenge of the 4 we visited is growing the slowest. People just want to blame growth. All they say is house prices are high because of growth. It's not growth. Look at that, it's not growth. Growth's an excuse, it's not an explanation. You blame growth when you can't do your job properly. It's not income. Yeah, there's a little bit of variation there, but look, Denver's a lot sort of materially wealthier than Portland, but the prices are the same. So it's not just an income thing. It's not an overall economy thing. The US economy now is very strong. It's going well. It's not just a function of a successful economy that you can't house your population. There's something else there. There's something in decision making. There's something that we haven't got right in the way that we make decisions about how we grow and invest in our cities. So we asked the delegates, actually, look, we said, took away 40 odd folk, said, what is it? What are these guys doing? How do they do it? And it was interesting what they said. They didn't say, as you'd expect, usually we do these things and people will point out that it was this model or this thing or that thing. They actually focused on some soft stuff. What we found is that there is an attitude in America to particularly growth, and I am talking about growth here, I'm not talking about everything, because we do some things a lot better in New Zealand than they do them in America, but when it comes to growth management, there is a fantastic attitude across the parties responsible for growth to make sure it happens. How do you get a good attitude? How do you get a good attitude in your regional government? How do you get a good attitude for your central government to want to work together and work with the private sector, work with the people who are going to build houses? How do you get that attitude that I want to come in, we're going to have this, we're going to make this happen? Because if you looked at those comments coming through from delegates, these are senior people, these are people who know what they're talking about, you find out that the flip side is they don't really think we have that attitude here. And we don't, actually. Why not? Why don't we have a good attitude to growth? Why don't we really want to make things happen? Well, there's a couple of things, actually, we found. There's really two things that the states had which gave them that great attitude. First one in particular, incentivisation. And Dave really has started to hit the nail on the head. He went through local government is not incentivised to want growth, unfortunately. That's what he's talking about when he's saying give us some tools, give us some drivers, give us some reason to grow. And the other thing's flexibility. You can be incentivised all you want, but if you ain't got any tools and you've got no capacity, you're still not going to be able to do anything about it. So it's the way that these two things fit together. And in the States, they have drivers and they have flexibility. So what do I mean by, what are those drivers? Well, as Dave pointed out, in some of the cities that they're looking at, Dave, can I just say, I do not approve of a beer tax at all. There are other methods. We should not go that far, that's extreme. What we should look at, though, are these buoyant taxes. I love that term. We need these local government's got to have buoyant taxes. They've got to have some reason to grow the economy. They've got to have some reason to go, we want to grow, we want to win, we want to succeed, we want to thrive. Rates don't do that. Rates are set. They're set at a dollar amount each year. And if you want to increase it, you've got to go out to your electorate and say, I want to take more money out of your pocket. Do you agree? No, I don't agree. So what do? You pull back on investment. You don't get more homes, property prices go up. Property prices go up. It's actually an incentive for the established electorate to actually say, I don't want growth. The whole incentivisation system in New Zealand is fundamentally broken. And it's pushing people onto streets. We've got one of the highest homeless rates in the world, or in the developed world, in Auckland right now. We're worse than most cities in America. We're worse. Even with Housing New Zealand providing 7 or 8% of the homes in Auckland, we're still worse. We've got more people on the street. The other flip side, and I know Dave's not quite so excited about this one, but we think that, if you're going to give cities the upside, if you're going to start to give them more access to more tax or whatever it is, whether it's a sales tax, whatever, but there's got to be that downside. And that was a great thing about America. They had more options to tax, but they had more responsibility, and if they got it wrong, they felt that. So, increasing homelessness in the States was a cost that was transferred to local government. In New Zealand, a lot of those increasing social costs are picked up by central government. So local government's actually responsible for a heck of a lot of growth, but if it doesn't get it right, central government pays. What kind of incentive does that set in your system? So this is an example of incentivisation just that we looked in the States, but it's really just focused on there in Denver. They had the airport was reaching its length of life, so they thought, what do? They went large. They didn't go, let's just spend as little as possible. They said, what is the value? What could we achieve if we went big on this? We know we need an airport. What could we achieve? And they said, look, we are an infrastructure city. We've always been. We're in the centre of the US. We're going to position ourselves as a transport and an infrastructure hub. It's part of a wider strategic economic development objective. And so they went big. They turned their old airport into an urban development. They generated nearly $5 billion of value, and they built an entirely new airport funded through an SPV, or part funded, so I'm going to touch on that one in a second. But what they were really focused on was how do we maximise the value to our city, not minimise the cost. That's what incentivisation changes. Flexibility is the other big part of the picture there, and that's really more tools in the toolkit. So that is about some of these different funding and financing tools, and there's also a bit there on governance. So this is the big one now. So you've seen this coming through, and I think probably people are still trying to wrap their head around it. So I'll hopefully provide a little bit of assistance here. In the States, they call them special district because they're actually units of government, right? So you actually go out and you set up a unit of government to fund and finance infrastructure. You set up, it's almost like a little mini local government. You go out and their revenue is tied to a project. Maybe it's some water pipes or something like that. Maybe it's a road project. Maybe it's light rail. But what they do, they say, well, there's going to be a revenue stream here from this thing. Maybe the revenue is in property rates. Maybe it's in tolls, whatever it is. But we know there's going to be a revenue. What we're going to do is we're going to borrow against that revenue. That's what all this SPV business, special districts in Australia, project financing, they're all there in America. Project financing, these are all referring to the same fundamental process of saying, if we invest, there's a revenue stream. That revenue stream can repay debt to build infrastructure, which is big and clunky and costs a lot of money up front. We can't do that. Dave and his co-mayors, we heard in Auckland yesterday, they roof out at 265% of revenue, the Auckland Council. When you borrow against a revenue stream separated from your council rates, your leverage can go up orders of magnitude. That's how you get stuff done. That's how you support growth. So I'll have look at a couple of the examples here. Here's a TIF. This might be a land use development-y sort of a thing. You might build light rail, and you know it's going to add a whole bunch of property value. So you look into the future. How much property value is it going to generate? We're going to capture that, and we're going to use it to pay off the interest payments on a whole chunk of debt to fund the project. This is a motorway toll. I think my chief showed you this one yesterday. What this shows is that you build a piece of motorway, you can toll it, you can borrow against that toll revenue. What this also shows very interestingly is, of course, if you use that toll dynamically, you can guarantee speeds on a motorway. We're worrying about Penlink at the moment. What we could do for Penlink, you put a toll on it. Public says they want toll, or the community there. Why don't we stick a toll on it? Why don't we stick a dynamically charged lane all the way down to the CBD? What would that do? You've got a revenue stream. You could add to it, but what you could do is you could actually take away the busway. You wouldn't need a busway. You don't need a busway when you can guarantee speeds using a dynamic toll such as that used at LBJ. Tremendous project. Flexible governance. So it's not just about the tools in the toolkit. The governance even moves in the States. They've got a crazy system. They've got a federal government which doesn't do anything except cause trouble. They've got states which are varying and doing all sorts of different stuff. Actually, the heart of US growth is really in that local government space. But then there's flex. They can actually change their governance. New Zealand, we can't. It's all comes through statute. It's from central government, top down, very rigid, doesn't move. So here we've got a couple of, here's an example here. This is in Portland. This is Metro. They realised they had a problem with local governments, being lots of local government, about 16 around the Portland area. And they said, we need some sort of mechanism to bring us all together. So they took an established entity, but they just started enlarging it because it worked. It was like, look, let's get some regional governments here, make some collective decisions. But they've got that flex in the system. We don't have that. We just don't seem to have any flex, that ability to just, it's got to come from the top down. So Flexibility and incentives are great, but they don't quite explain why 2 of the cities seem to be able to keep up with demand for housing, and 2 of them don't. And that actually comes down to two things. Competitive urban land markets. If you're going to constrain land, any sort of development land, there is a cost to that. You reduce the ability for developers to innovate, to purchase land, to have vision. How do you, I mean, Woodlands just north of Houston there. Some guy 30 years ago bought like 12,000 hectares and thought, I'm going to put a city of 100,000 there. He's going to build a Hamilton. He built a Hamilton. How could you do that in Auckland? Or near Auckland? You can't do that. So you need that competition in that land market so that somebody can go out and get land and innovate, and whether that's brownfield or greenfields, it's all about the story. And the other thing, though, is that ad valorem property taxes, and that's about buoyancy, but it's about buoyancy tied to your property prices. Rates aren't tied to property prices very well. A little bit, but they're capped. So it's always a dollar value. So a house, your property value doubles overnight. Actually, your rate stays exactly the same. It's only when the mayor comes out and says, okay, we're going to stick it up by 2%. So that's a price signal. Think about what would have happened to Auckland house prices if Auckland Council's revenue had doubled with house prices in the last few years. Well, you would have found a lot of people complaining to their council saying, mate, you sort this out because I'm having to pay rates and I'm really angry about it. And they're going up fast every year. Well, we don't have that price signal. So a lot of people don't think there's a problem in Auckland. We've got growing homelessness. We've got increasing costs. We're having to stick up the minimum wage to pay for housing. We've got teachers striking. We've got nurses striking. This is a housing problem. It's not a wider economy problem. The wider economy is doing great. We've stuffed housing. Prices are going up for people who don't own homes faster than they can earn it, and they're feeling the pinch, and now they're getting angry about it. We've got to solve the housing crisis. Look at that at Houston. Not everybody's ideal city, not by a long shot. But they provide for growth, they provide affordable housing, and look at their incomes there in relation to some of their peers. People in Houston got more disposable income because their growth market works. So in our report, look, we've reached a few conclusions. Look, we can meet this growth problem. There's nothing, it's not that growth's too hard or anything. You can do it. Houston's growing faster than Auckland, it's growing more affordably than Auckland. But we've got to tweak these incentives. We've got to improve flexibility. We've got to do something about the competition in land markets. This is killing us. And we've got to do something about these price signals. And that's further to what Dave was talking about. So we think, look, the long term is this idea. This theme is coming through here. You've heard my chief up here in years gone by. Planning, funding, governance, RMA, LGA, LTMA. Kim did a tremendous job yesterday from EMA talking about this problem. But this system of domestic decision-making, this allocation of decision-making is not working. The people who plan aren't necessarily the ones who fund. We try to plan stuff if there's no money. We've got central government maybe pulling back from some stuff where it needs to take a front foot. We've got local government who can't make a decision on something because it's not their job when it probably should be. This whole system of domestic decision-making is just not working. We need to think about who does what better. Is that really a central function? Is it a local function? Who should be doing it? We need to think about that a lot more. We've got to get these structures right. We've got to get these incentives right. Is the money going to the right place, to the people who need it, to fund the things which are really important? So we're pretty pleased with some of the funding review and some of the work the government's doing there, but certainly there's time to pick up the speed of some of that. And then there's the short term. So that's the latest long term. That's a big effort to get and change these fundamental decision-making structures around. Shorter term, there's a few things we suggest. We've got to find some way of rewarding councils. Maybe that's just the government throwing a bit of money out there. Provincial growth funds is a great start. Why not start tying that to economic performance? Great opportunity to expand the provincial growth fund. Council provides economic growth, provincial fund comes in, tops it up. Might make councils more excited. We've got to transfer some more costs to councils if we give them the revenue, obviously. They've got to have some way of, there's got to be a price signal to say you're not doing your job right. Do we transfer the cost of homelessness to them? whatever it might be. Has to come hand in hand with the additional revenue, of course. Expand Crown infrastructure fibres, partners, fibres. That's the SPV model. This idea of project financing, so you can leverage up much bigger and get stuff built. Tolls and express lane, bonds, same deal. Let's just get this stuff moving. If somebody wants to finance something, let them do it, build it, go hard, don't stand in the way. You got people on the street, for goodness sakes. We need some more direct voter and funding. Great strength in the US system is this idea of these little units of local government, direct voting on initiatives. Why don't we just have a vote in Auckland or Wellington for these big projects and just say, instead of having political fights about them, just have a big vote. Do you support this project? This is how much it will cost and this is how it's going to be paid for. Depoliticise it. Fantastic. We've got to separate water from councils. We've got to find some way of just breaking the stranglehold there. That doesn't mean privatise them, but just means we've got to find some way of taking it away from capacity-constrained councils. We've got to find a better solution than urban boundaries and urban regulations to control growth and try to direct it the way we want. We've got to incentivise the things we want, not stop the things we don't want. And UDAs, what a great policy. We can't wait for that to come out. Perfect for a satellite city. David. So thank you very much. There's the report. If you want it there, you can hit the link. Well, you can't hit it now, but you might be able to hit it later. And any questions, I'm happy to take them in the panel. Thank you.